Hiya, Honest Discussioner here. On my second philosophical proofs video, the reworkings that I just did, there is a video response from a YouTuber called Jedi Master Bobo, who respectfully gave some criticisms on a few things that I mentioned in Exodus. Now, I answered those on her channel on that video, and that's not really what this video is going to be about, but it did make me want to discuss Exodus because it had been a long time since I'd actually taken a close look at it. And what I found was that it's probably even more of an inconsistent story than Genesis is. Now, for those of you out there who are Christians and look at the Bible as an allegory, this probably won't be directed towards you, but for any of those that believe Exodus is a historical story that happened to, in any way as the story in the Bible says, then I'm going to have some points to make here. If anyone can explain anything to me, any of my criticisms, or believes I'm not taking something into consideration, especially if you happen to really know your stuff, like if ProfMTH is happening to watch this video, please feel free to criticize me and point anything out. I will be happy to either add an annotation or correct myself in a later video. Now, the first thing I noticed that I thought was a bit inconsistent was the beginning of the story, which was the Israelites basically reproducing like mad at a rate that scared the current Pharaoh. So in order to control the population, he decided to declare that all of the women babies, all of the girls that were born, were to be spared, while all of the male newborns were to be killed on the spot. Now, I have to ask, why would Pharaoh exactly do this? Because if you're going to try to control population, you wouldn't really try to kill off the men, because any man could impregnate, let's say, as many women as he had time for, and obviously some are going to get through the cracks. Also, they probably would have most of the labor, so if you're going to try to keep them as slaves, it probably would be more efficient to just have a certain percentage of them killed, or maybe have all second and third borns be killed on the spot. Basically what China has today. That seems to be something a little bit more reasonable. The whole thing with killing only the boys seems to be more so a way to push the story of Moses ahead, and not so much an actual tactic to control population. Now, there's not much else to talk about until the real main part of the story here, and that is when Moses tries to set the people free. There are things that I can mention, but they're too minor in detail to talk about. The video would be way too long. So I'm going to now kind of discuss all of these different plagues. A couple of things interested me about these plagues. One, their order, because you have a lot of really big ones in the beginning, and then you have some small ones in the middle, and then you have the really big ones in the end. That seemed to me a bit strange. Now, my favorite plague of all, if one would have a favorite plague, would have to be the turning of the Nile into blood. Now, what interested me about this was that it wasn't just the Nile. According to Exodus, it's also all of the streams, canals, rivers, ponds, and even all of the water in the pots. They apparently only were able to hydrate themselves by digging around the Nile. Now, why that area wouldn't get infected by the water from the Nile, I don't know. Maybe it actually does take a while to filter through, but I still imagine that something like that, something as catastrophic an event, would probably reach the ears of history. But we don't see any record of something so cataclysmic. And this is also going to factor in majorly in how Egypt was able to survive these plagues. Another interesting note was the frogs, because this was the last thing that the advisors of Pharaoh, his magicians, were able to replicate in line with what Yahweh was able to do. The interesting thing is that Yahweh brings down all of these frogs, and the magicians are like, oh, we can do that too, and they do it, even though apparently it was already a plague. To me, this seems like casting a spell on, someone, and them casting that same spell on themselves just to show you that they can do it too. This doesn't really seem to be anything that anyone would really want to do to their own country, since it was already not necessarily a very good thing. Another thing I'd like to note, and actually this isn't me noting it, but something that I heard in one of ProfMTH's video, I think probably one of the best points to be made here, is that Yahweh apparently kills off all of the livestock that the Egyptians had. And then at 2 later times also mentions that he kills Egyptian livestock. So say what you want about Yahweh, he is very thorough. I'd also like to note that at the point of which these guys were killed with hail, the livestock that is, there had already been a very long line of plagues that had been very successful in how damaging they were. And yet some of the people, some of the Pharaoh's advisors did listen to Moses, and some did not. Now, I can imagine an atheist denying this and saying it's all superstition, but these were already very superstitious people. They didn't deny the existence of God. This was just one man who God forced, through hardening his heart, to not let the Israelites go. Why they would not listen to such a warning when there was such consistency in prediction before that is really beyond me, and seems to again just drive the story forward and show the stubbornness of certain people in Pharaoh's court. Now, at this point, since we have the hail and we have those minor, apparently minor plagues of fleas and gnats, they're annoying things, but I'd take fleas and gnats over bloody water any day of the week, personally. And then you also have the hail that destroyed part of the crops, and then you have the locusts that ate all the rest of the crops. You have all of the animals dead, some of them dead 3 times over. And then you have the really big one, which is the firstborn of all of the Egyptians dead. There was the water shortage problem. All of the ponds and lakes and streams were affected by this. No more fish in the ocean, in the rivers because of that. No crops. How in the world did the Egyptians survive as a culture? And let's also throw in the fact that all of the best military units, as well as their leader Pharaoh, were at the bottom of the ocean when the sea fell in on them. How could a civilization that had very little water in the desert, without any animals, without any crops, and without even a functioning government, survive? In fact, even Pharaoh's advisors tried to convince Pharaoh to let the Egyptians go, because can't he see that the entire country was already ruined, basically, which is very interesting, since not only the hardened Pharaoh decided to pursue the Egyptians because they lost the labor, but also the advisors that were consistently on the side of the Israelis throughout a lot of the story. I'd also like to mention that twice, or at least 3 times possibly, did Exodus mention that God made the people of Israel favorable in the eyes of the Egyptian people, so much so that they were willing to give them silver and gold. So now we're going to add on to the fact that they took a huge economic hit through all of their valuables. I would really like to know how they could have survived such a catastrophic set of events, as well, since a big portion of their slave population was gone because the Israelis were able to escape. So that's the first couple points. There's probably a lot more to delve into, and I might want to talk about the wandering in the desert later on, but those are the points that I have to make at the moment, or at least the ones I can remember. So please feel free to criticize me, and if anyone can explain to me how Egypt survived and didn't starve to death or die of thirst within the first month, and how this all completely escaped any bit of history outside of the Old Testament, I would really appreciate that. Have a nice day. Honest Discussioner, out.